All right. Hello and welcome to Around the Horns, the show where we are talking about everything regarding the University of Texas baseball program. I am Aaron. I am here, as always, with my co-host, Zach. Today, we are going to talk about the OU series that took place over the weekend. As much as we do not want to, we will hit briefly on the Texas Southern game from Tuesday night, and then we will, of course, be talking Big 12 big picture, where the standings currently sit now that Texas is no longer at the top. And then we will be previewing the big series this weekend against TCU, and of course, talking a little bit about Tanner Witt and his potential return. Zach, I'm not looking for 8 scoreless from you today. I just need you to throw strikes, man. Can you give me that?
Listen, you might get a one and down in the dirt. You might get a high fastball. You don't know what you're going to get today.
All right. Well, yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like you fit right in. But all jokes aside, let's get into it. It was a weekend full of pain. It was a weekend full of walks. It was a weekend full of wild pitches. And it was a weekend with 3 Oklahoma wins over the University of Texas. The first time Oklahoma has swept Texas since I was alive. So that was not great. It was 1998, the last time that happened. Zach, we will start with Friday night. And then, I mean, Texas dropped a Friday night game, which has not happened very often this year, of course, because Lucas Gordon has been one of the very best pitchers in the country. And Zach, this might have been the best that I've seen him. I mean, he went 7 innings, 1 earned, 9 Ks. You know, he's had outings where he's given up 0 runs. He's had outings with more than 9 strikeouts. But when you talk about the type of changeup that he had going against Oklahoma, and then he was establishing the inside fastball, he was able to use that slider against lefties, but really honing in back on that changeup, keeping righties off balance all night. He was fantastic, and that the offense just didn't back him up, kind of like they had been all year. And it was a very bad loss when you consider the state of the rest of the pitching staff. It just puts that extra pressure, like we have to go out there and win on Friday when Gordon's going, especially when Gordon is pitching really well. And that just unfortunately was not the case in the opener.
Yeah, I mean, one of the singular complaints you could have about Lucas Gordon is his high pitch count, right? Doesn't allow him to go really super deep in the game. Didn't have that case against OU. 9 strikeouts, 7 innings. He gave up 6 hits that were spread. As you said, that changeup was just deadly. They couldn't figure it out. They couldn't hit it. When they did hit it, it was just soft contact on the ground. He mentioned after the game, he said, you know, when he had been working on that slider so much, he kind of taken attention away from the changeup. And he said he spent the last 2 weeks or so really kind of honing in on that changeup. And you could tell, like, it was super sharp. And it was interesting because that was something Pierce had talked about to us before the season. You know, when we talked about the slider, he's like, sometimes when you go to that second breaking pitch, you know, your off speed or maybe your other pitches suffer a little bit. And I don't think his stuff necessarily suffered, but you could tell that he had been working on it pretty heavily. So,
yeah, no, I mean, that's just a natural pitch for him. So it's not surprising that, you know, when he did put a little bit of extra focus back on the changeup, that he was able to get it going how he wanted to. But it was really on Friday. It kind of came down to the situational hitting. They had some chances early in the game with Doubt hit on the mound. They kind of had him on the ropes, and they just couldn't deliver the big hit to put up the crooked number to kind of separate with a 2 or 3 run lead. And then you look up and, you know, the starter ends up going, you know, 6 innings, and they're able to go to their lefty in the bullpen, and Texas is just never really able to get the big hit. And then you do have the bullpen come in, and of course, Ace Whitehead ultimately is the one tasked with coming in with the bases loaded. He issues the bases loaded walk to bring in the eventual winning run. It was, it was a tough blow. And then, of course, you move to Saturday, and that takes it to a whole nother level. Anything else you want to hit on from that Friday night game before we start talking about the doubleheader?
No, you know, you touched on the fact that Braxton from OU, the starting pitcher, Texas had him on the ropes multiple times and really just couldn't put in the final kill shot.
Yeah.
It allowed Oklahoma to get to Carter Campbell, and he was really, really good. I don't know where they've stashed him, but like, he's the best guy on their pitching staff that I've seen all season. And he really kept the Horns off balance for 33 pitches, 3 innings, gave it 2 hits, and that was it. I mean, it was lights out. And so you could tell after the game, Coach Pierce kind of said off to the side, he was like, look, we're going to have to look at weather. We don't know what's going to happen yet, but hey guys, it might be a doubleheader, which we do not want. You could tell he was emphasizing they did not want a doubleheader on Saturday, because if things go wrong, it tends to snowball very quickly. And that's what we saw going into Saturday.
Yeah. So then, I mean, we're getting ready to go to the additional Saturday morning. Word comes down that they are in fact going to go with a doubleheader. And I'm sure this was the first thought for a lot of people, but I know my first thought was, all right, we got one day, 18 innings to cover on the mound for a team that just used Lucas Gordon. And I was nervous. I'm sure a lot of people were nervous. And that ended up being the problem that I kind of thought it would be, just based on how some of the pitchers have been trending lately. 18 innings in one day, man, that's a lot to cover, especially we'll get to this later, but Charlie Hurley was clearly not going to be in the picture in the OU series. So that just limited the pitching staff even more. And then, yeah, I mean, everyone knows this by now, but if not, I hate to break it to you that Oklahoma did win both the games on Saturday as well to complete the sweep. On the weekend, Texas issued 20 walks, 3 hit by pitch, 4 wild pitches. I mean, it was just the story, every time, it was seemingly an endless run of leadoff walks and then hit by pitch. And, they'd walk a guy to extend an inning. And then when they did walk a guy to put him on base, that's just how baseball works. The guy usually did come around to score, and Texas was just not able to stop the flow of walks. First game, you got Travis Staley. He puts up a 0 in the first, comes back out for the second inning, second week in a row. That flip just switched, and second inning was a disaster. He walks the first 3 to start the second inning. Didn't have as long of a leash as he did last week after the meltdown last week. So he comes out of the game. In comes Zane Morehouse. I mean, it was a whole mess. Where do you want to start with on that Saturday game, or the first Saturday game?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that, just this Travis Staley, like, what, I don't know what it is about the second inning. If it's him going and sitting down, it wasn't a particularly long inning, right? Like, he didn't have to sit down for 30 minutes or something silly like that, but he comes out and he doesn't have his release point. He doesn't have his rhythm. I don't know what it is about going from that, that first inning where you kind of, everything's running through, to just completely losing it. But 2 weeks in a row, and yeah, you mentioned it, but Pierce had a very, very short leash for him. And maybe that was a bad thing, right? Like, maybe leave him a little bit longer. I don't know. But, Zane Morehouse came in and couldn't hit the side of the barn, right? He was all over the place. His fastball, it felt like times he was maybe trying to overthrow a little bit. He would run in there at 93, and then on the next one would be like 96, 97. And so it kind of makes you wonder, if it's touch, or if it's actual just like the ability to kind of control oneself and stay compact and stay within yourself. And you saw that from the breaking ball as well. He throws something that was really good, and then the next 3 of them would just be like, what, where are you throwing? And maybe that's the thing. He's not locating. He's just throwing, right? He's not actually pitching, which is an issue because you don't know what's going to happen. And shout out to Chase Loomis. He's a UT kid through and through, and he came in and he gave the Horns a chance to win the game. He went 5 innings, struck out 5. There's 75 pitches, which is, I'm sure, all career highs across the board. But like I said, he steadied things, and it's not that he was throwing anything special, but he was keeping them off balance, inside, outside, fastball, changeup. It was as simple as that, and he kept the entire OU lineup off the board. Just didn't know what to do with it. So,
yeah, no, I mean, Loomis was really good. He was able to save the pitching staff for the last game, and give Texas a chance to win the first game in the process. But it's just tough with Morehouse because part of what, when he's at his best, part of what makes him tough to hit is, he just has a pretty electric delivery with a lot of moving parts. He's very fast arm, he's got a big leg kick. He's got his arm just has a lot of whip. The problem is when you're not clicking on all cylinders, it's the guys with the herky-jerky movements, a lot of moving parts. Those are the ones that when the pressure amps up, it's tough to slow down and repeat your mechanics to be able to land a slider in the zone in a 1-1 count, or, just locate a fastball in a full count just in the zone to make the guy hit it. And for whatever reason, he hasn't been able to kind of slow down and hone in his mechanics when the pressure amps up. I was a little surprised to see him brought in with the bases loaded and no outs, just given the fact that he has been a little erratic out of the stretch and some high pressure spots in recent weeks. But, at the same time, you do have 18 innings to cover. So you're going to need some outs out of Morehouse eventually. That was tough to see in the first game. Texas tried to, battle back, but again, it just wasn't enough. When you're down 8-0 in the third, it's just not going to happen most of the time, even if you are at home with a pretty good offense. And that was the case, unfortunately. And then, anything else you want to hit there before we?
I was just going to touch on, and then OU, Carter Campbell having thrown 33 pitches on Friday night, comes back Saturday, midday, right? And throws 40 more in 3.1 innings. Or 3 1/3 innings. So, it clearly was, they knew that they could get to Texas with Carter, and they said, we see a chance for the win. We've got to try to get there. And they were able to drag it out late and, add on an extra one and really keep it out of reach. But yeah, it's crazy seeing some of these pitchers use back-to-back days like we've seen at Oklahoma State and in Oklahoma.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were definitely very aggressive with Campbell there for a good reason. He was giving them a lot of good innings down the stretch there. We will move to in between doubleheaders when we look at each other with pain in our eyes. We decide we're going to go down to the concourse hunting for, chicken, candy, ice cream, anything to make us feel better, soak up the pain. Temporary relief is what we were looking for after the travesty that had been unfolding. And then suddenly we get back up to the press box expecting to, have LBJ on the mound to start game 3. And we find out it's going to be Kobe Minchie, which I was a little surprised because he had thrown 64 pitches on Wednesday night against Abilene Christian. This was a Saturday game, so that means 64 pitches on just 2 days rest. That's a little unusual. I mean, obviously, I'm sure that they made sure that, they asked him how his arm felt. I'm sure his arm felt fine, and he said he was ready to go. But still a little surprised. I think the best explanation there is, they knew LBJ was going to be the bulk pitcher for that game. They knew they were going to need 4 or 5 innings out of him. So they were probably thinking, if we know we're going to need 4 or 5 innings out of LBJ, we might as well try to make that the last 4 or 5 innings of the game. So that way we have our, best pitcher available out there in the high pressure spots, and not send out some of the other guys in the high pressure spots, which LBJ did end up coming in. He did very well. He went 5 strong innings, only allowing, I believe, 1 earned run. Very strong showing from him. But yeah, I mean, Minchie, he just didn't have it on short rest, which I think it was just a lot to ask of him to go out there, make his first Big 12 start as a freshman, trying to avoid the sweep against Oklahoma on short rest. And he just didn't have it. I mean, he goes out there, 4 earned runs, 3 walks, 1 hit by pitch, a wild pitch. It just didn't work out for him. And then, Texas again tries to make a late push. It was just such a frustrating weekend because it was just walks, and then it was Texas not being able to get the big hit. They would, then you would have Chase Loomis come in and give a really good outing, and you would have LBJ come in and pitch pretty well. And it just wasn't enough because the walks had, done them in earlier in the game, and they dug themselves into too big of a hole that the offense was just not able to rally out of.
Yeah. And you look at the stat line from the pitching staff on the Horns, and it was really just that first hole. They got down in the first and they never could get out of it. Burke did a really good job in 2 innings. LBJ was, he gave up 3 hits, but I mean, he was virtually unhittable for 5 innings. And so, yeah, that was definitely disconcerting. On back-to-back days, or back-to-back games, I should say, on the same day, the middle reliever for the OU Sooners comes in and strikes out 7. Like that can't happen if you're the Horns and you want to try to go win a series, or you want to win a game. You can't strike out 7 times and just let the middle relief kind of just cruise, because the amount of arms that OU saved by just being slightly more consistent and staying out of that trouble was pretty impressive. Which is what you saw from OU last year whenever Skip, their numbers weren't great, but they got better and better and better as the season went on. They started picking the pieces at the right time. Texas, kind of similar to last year, looks really good early, and now you start to see the kind of the issues in the bullpen come out. And so yeah, they've got to figure out a way to kind of put those two pieces together. The other thing, the middle of the lineup really struggled badly on Saturday. And so, of course you're playing 18 innings, so there's going to be some tiredness there, but yeah, it's just a bad weekend overall. And that was very evident in Pierce's comments. He didn't think too highly of his team's play.
Yeah, no, I mean, he said it was just embarrassing. He said it was one of the worst weekends of his whole tenure at Texas. He was clearly not happy with the walks. I mean, that just leads us into, where does this team kind of go from here? We mentioned Charlie Hurley a little bit. Someone asked him if Hurley was a little banged up, and he very quickly said no. He just has not been throwing strikes, and when he starts to throw strikes, he'll get a chance to pitch. So he clearly, he might be struggling a little bit in practice. His last couple outings in the games have not gone very well, but this is still a pitching staff that needs the Charlie Hurley that we saw earlier in the year. So that's tough. Then, it really comes down to Travis Staley and Zane Morehouse. I don't know what to do with those two guys at this point. It's hard to imagine you can run Travis Staley back out there for another Saturday start at this point, just given the early meltdowns in the last couple of weeks. I feel like it's probably time to just let LBJ go with that role. But at the same time, you need LBJ in other part, you need more arms in general to cover that many innings over the weekend. So whatever order you want to put them in, they're just short guys to get them 27 competent innings right now. And a lot of that, unfortunately, falls on Staley and Morehouse. And those were, when we're hearing stuff before the season starts, we're hearing about, fall ball, or we're hearing about preseason inter squads in the spring. We're hearing about Zane Morehouse and how much better he looks. And he was, in consideration to be the Friday night guy. Travis Staley comes on strong at the very end to take the Sunday starter spot to start the year. And then just all the improvements that those guys had made. And they had good starts earlier in the year, and they showed that improvement. It just has kind of come crashing back down to reality a little bit here. And it's been tough. It's obviously, you can't pin it all on those two guys. There's been a ton of people that have struggled to throw strikes. Maybe we can get Augie in here to throw more strikes for this team. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, I don't know where you would go with guys like Staley and Morehouse, but those have been the two that have really stuck out just from a not throwing strikes department that this team really, really needs. And the talent is there with those guys, which just makes it, more frustrating for them and, for the fans and everyone involved.
Yeah, and it's not like these guys are not wanting to throw strikes, right? That you're a pitcher.
Yeah,
your whole goal in life is to throw a ball for a strike. But there's times when inconsistent catching can affect a pitcher. There's times when rhythm can affect a pitcher, or inconsistent hitting. If the team is going 0 for 3 at the plate time and time again, and they're being rolled out there, or they're having to sit for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 25 minutes, like all of these things are different variables that pitchers have to take account for. And one of the things is, again, for me, it comes down to consistency. We know the guys have stuff. Morehouse can hit 97. Staley can hit 95, 96. LBJ can hit 98, 99. We've seen it in person. The thing is, I think at times they maybe try to locate instead of just pitch, or they're over pitching because they're out of rhythm, which can, make them lose their focus point or their release point. And how you clean that up, I don't know. Last year, David Pierce was very specific. You cannot fix mechanics this late in the season, or even in the midseason. It's really tough, right? And so I think what you and I talked about on the concourse when we were hunting some food was, you have to ride the hot hand. If LBJ looks good, let him go. Just put him out there, because what we've seen is one of the reasons Morehouse was moved from a starter role to a closer is they needed someone to come in and try to shore up the back end.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now it's throwing everything off, because if he's not good at the back end, you don't want to put him at the front end. Yeah. You don't want to have him at the back end. What do you do with him, right? Like, you can't have him in those high leverage situations now. And so not the lack of ability, and to your point, the lack of arms, having that kind of defined place it's really hurt the team both years now. So,
yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you talk about how, it's pretty common knowledge that you don't want to change mechanics in the middle of a season because it just that gives the pitchers too much to think about. If you're dealing with mechanical tweaks in the middle of the season, then you're not focused on other little things like controlling the running game and specific game plans. And it can just be really difficult to make mechanical tweaks in the middle of a season. But that's probably where Texas is at right now. David Pierce mentioned as much after the games on Saturday that they do need to go in there and look at some arm pass and clean up some mechanical stuff, which is never what you want to hear. We've talked about, the ability to define set roles. That is pretty much out the window right now. So that pitching staff is now forced to deal with two things that you do not want to be dealing with in the middle of a season. It's just going to be tough. There's people out there, just tell them to throw strikes, just tell them to throw it down the middle. Well, I've got unfortunate news. They have been told that. I can promise you they've been told that, probably north of 100 times, and it just hasn't come together yet. And they've got to get it, figured out pretty soon because they are now sitting at 8-7 in conference play. They are no longer ranked. They're no longer projected to host a regional. All that fun stuff has been temporarily pushed to the side. It's been tough, man. The D1 baseball came out with the projected rankings now, and they've got them as a 2 in Fayetteville against Arkansas. West Virginia is now at the top of the standings. Texas Tech is somehow ranked 14th. It's just very weird year in college baseball. Man, yeah, you have any thoughts on that stuff quickly? Or you want to move to the Texas Southern game that we watched on Tuesday night and just quickly hit on some highlights there?
Yeah, no, let's talk Texas Southern. We'll go to TCU and we can hit up on the Big 12 in a little while.
Yeah, so Texas Southern, we are recording this on Wednesday afternoon. We watched Texas beat down Texas Southern very late into the night, even if it was just a 7-inning run. Well, we had, of course, just a classic double rain delay without a pitch being thrown in between them. Just something that is very common and that you see all the time in the game of baseball, of course. But of course, Texas has done a really good job this year of kind of just beating down on these teams that they're supposed to beat down on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. Of course, you can't take too much away from it when it happens over and over again. It's like, all right, we need to see this on the weekend a little more consistently. They know that, everyone knows that. But at the same time, it's always better to, win these games than it is to lose these games. And it's always good to have guys go 3 for 3 and rack up a bunch of hits and see a bunch of different arms and get different guys at bats. And that's what happened again on Tuesday. Texas, I believe, 10 doubles. They almost tied a program record there. You had Jared Thomas he's just on base 5 times, I believe. I don't know. He changed his walk-up song to this whole Snake Farm thing. I don't like it. Some people seem to like it. I think it's weird. It just makes me uncomfortable. I don't think it's catchy. But if it turns Jared Thomas into prime Christian Yelich, but playing first base, I think I can get used to it because that's what he's looked like recently. It was another big night for Jared Thomas to play.
Yeah, Jared Thomas. Yeah, he's went 3 for 3 on the night with a single, a double, and a home run. He had 2 walks.
Yeah.
2 RBIs. Like, yeah, the dude, ever since he changed his song, and he may have a little something in his life going on. It's just, he's a monster at first base. He's got speed. He's stealing bases. His first single, he dropped it down for a bunt single, a la Eric Kennedy. He's learning the magic. He's hitting 287 on the season now. So props to the freshman. He's showing what he can do. So.
Yeah, he's just coming along, and he's become a really complete player. He showed the power last night with the double and with the moonshot homer. And then, as you mentioned, he bunted for a hit. He immediately stole a base. He's just a rare, can do it all left-handed hitting first baseman, which is just a really fun development there. But on the mound, Charlie Hurley got a chance. He was in the weird spot. He went out there for 1 inning, and then that's when the rain kind of started to come down. But even before that, it didn't look great. The thing with him right now is, he's really not able to throw strikes with any of his pitches, but he needs to be able to throw those breaking balls in the zone. He's got a slider and he's got a curveball. Traditionally, you would think, okay, he's got that big, 12-6 over the top curveball. Let's land that one in the zone a little more often. That sets up the fastball. That makes the fastball look harder. That, it's a different shape from the slider where you can put people away with 2 strikes with the slider that just looks a little different coming out of the hand. But when you're not able to land those off-speed pitches in the zone, hitters are on the fastball when they are in the zone. They see the spin and they're just going to spit on it because they know it hasn't been landing in the zone very often lately. That just kind of for a guy that's not out there throwing 96, 97, being able to throw off-speed pitches in the zone is so important. And that's just across the board at the college level. And that just hasn't been the case lately. But yeah, outside of that, DJ Burke looked pretty solid. Sam Morehouse, he was a little wild, but he threw some good pitches here and there. His last at bat was a very good strikeout to end it. But yeah, it was just a weird night on the mound, but the offense was, dominant as they have been against some of these, bad midweek teams.
Yeah, I mean, it was clearly a night game where you're going to go throw just random people that need time and work. Pierce said during the broadcast, he even thought about putting Staley in there, but Staley had worked early in the day. Morehouse pitched. They brought Kobe Minchie in, who, going inning, but throwing almost 30 pitches. Freshman Pierce George got a look. He still has issues throwing strike, but he can throw it 97. So, it feels like one of those people that if you can unlock, you've got a little bit of a weapon, but they haven't been able to unlock that yet. And so, it's just demolition derby. The left fielder, poor guy, was just having himself a night. Everyone likes to say, 90% of the earth is covered in water and the other 10% is covered by whomever. Well, I can safely say that he covers 0% of the earth because he had at least 4 balls hit over his head. I felt bad for the kid because Texas was just barreling balls his way all night long.
He just looked gassed. I mean, after the 7th double directly over your head, you just got to be thinking like, man, you got to be kidding me, man. Just get me out of here. Just get the ball over the fence or just hit it directly into my glove, but just stop hitting these doubles, that are barely out of my reach every single time.
Just like if you talk about the infield shift, they needed an outfield shift. Just put everyone in left field and just let Texas take BP. I mean, it was not good.
That kid was just running gassers from the wall back to his position for like 4.5 hours. Oh man, that was tough to watch.
The other highlight of the game I thought was really great was, Mitch Daly hits a 3-run home run into the bullpen. The bullpen pitcher who's warming up catches it with his glove, immediately enters the game. Like that was the signal. Well, time to go work. So that was pretty funny.
There's a lot of pitching changes. There was rain. There was a lot going on. That was quite the game there. Zach, let's move to this Texas TCU showdown that all of a sudden is a little bit less of a showdown than we thought it would be even a week ago, certainly than we thought it would be at the beginning of the season, because everyone knows Texas is coming off getting swept by Oklahoma, but TCU also coming in off a red hot, getting swept by West Virginia, which vaulted West Virginia up to the top of the standings. TCU comes in at 7-8 in Big 12 play. It's not just Texas that's struggling out there, people. There are other problems going on around the country. Just ask TCU. They were able to, I believe, come back and win their midweek game against a good Dallas Baptist team, but nonetheless, they are coming in struggling from a Big 12 perspective. I'll let you talk a little bit about what the Horned Frogs have going on over there right now.
Yeah, it's just, they're 23-18 on the season. They're just in a world of pain. And it's so funny because when we started the year off in Arlington, who was there with Texas, you look at them and you're like, holy, this is a College World Series caliber team. They've got all the pieces. They can hit, they can run, they've got power. They, play small ball, play defense, they can pitch. And you look at it now and you're like, what's going on? They've started 5 freshman pitchers in a row now. So last Tuesday, this past Tuesday, and then the weekend series against West Virginia, every single one of them freshmen. Yep. They got run ruled 17-7 on Sunday against West Virginia. It wasn't just like, oh, we kind of lost. It was, they weren't good. Their starting pitcher, or their starting pitching staff has just not been good overall throughout the season. And I mapped it out and it's changed. I don't think they've had the same rotation since going back to the very first part of the Oklahoma-Kansas series. So they lost Oklahoma. They came back and swept Kansas. After that, they have not had a singular pitching staff over a weekend. And even before that, there was moving pieces around. And, early in the season, their defense and their bullpen was the issue. Well, they got that fixed, and now it's starting pitching that's the issue. And so it's really hard to figure out what's going on up in Fort Worth. But you have 2 teams that are hurting very badly. And now they've got a lot of marbles to play for. Not necessarily the conference championship they were wanting, but they're kind of their safety and their, their ability to be in the top half of the Big 12. So
Yeah, no, I mean less glamorous marbles. That is for sure. Yeah, I mean you talk about the pitching staff. They're sixth in the conference right now with a conference ERA of 6.57. They started the freshman Cole Clicker on Friday night. He's a freshman right-handed pitcher. Overall, he's been doing a decent job working deep in the games. He's been pretty much their only guy that has been able to give them 5 or 6 innings. And that's mainly because he has a pretty solid 1.07 whip. He's been avoiding walks pretty well. He doesn't give up, too many hits in a given outing. So he's been the one guy that's been a little stable for them. But after that, you got the Saturday guy, Luis Rodriguez. He's a freshman righty. He only has 26 innings on the year. He's been a reliever pretty much all year. His first start of the season was last weekend against West Virginia. He was able to go 5 3 earned, but then it kind of went poorly after they removed him from the game. And then you go to Sunday, Ben Adbelt, he's a freshman lefty. He also made his first start of the year last weekend against West Virginia. He really has not been going deep in the games. He only went 3 innings against the Mountaineers, 3 earned runs. So, it's 2 pitching staffs that are in flux right now, man. We don't know who we're going to see. We're going to see Lucas Gordon on Friday. And then, we think we're going to see Tanner Witt for a short stint on Sunday. And then besides that, it is just going to be helter skelter all over the place for both of these teams, just trying to get competent arms. We'll see what the weather's like. We'll see which way the wind is blowing, but sure seems like a series that could come down to who's swinging it, who's getting the big hits, who's putting it out of the park, who's executing with runner on third, less than 2 outs, who's stealing bases. The pitching is not going to be one of those glamorous series where I turn on the TV with a gleam in my eye, just so excited to watch a bunch of fantastic pitching because, 60% of this series is it's probably not gonna look like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers across the board, overall Texas is a better hitting team. In conference, TCU's been better. But their OPS is around the same. Their on-base averages are nearly the same. One of the big differences is stolen bases. TCU's 91 of 102, which does not bode well for Texas pitching and catching. They have about the same power, right? Their whip's a little bit higher. Their defense has been around the same in conference. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really going to come down to, can the Texas batters lock in and try to knock out that starting pitching to get to the bullpen and just really Friday night for me, the whole series key is Friday night. Lucas Gordon has to get run support, 1. And then 2, Texas has to get to the bullpen and just beat them up, because if they can't, and they do what OU does, which was save their bullpen and their pitching staff for Saturday, Sunday, they're going to be in trouble, right? Because Texas is going to give up runs. We know that they're going to walk in, they're going to give up some untimely hits. So yeah, to me, it all comes down to Friday night. You set the tone, and if you can't set the tone on Friday night, this team is in big trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think the motto going into this weekend just has to be just keep hitting. I mean, do not take the foot off the gas. If you are down 7-0 in the 4th, keep hitting, because this TCU pitching staff, it can melt down just as quickly as, the Texas pitching staff can. So if you're down big, just keep hitting, keep putting pressure on them. You never know what's going to happen. If Texas is up 8-1 in the 7th inning, keep hitting, because you never know what's going to happen down the stretch with the Texas bullpen lately. Regardless of the situation, do not take an at-bat for granted. Do not take a scoring situation for granted. Put together really quality at-bats for 27 innings all weekend and keep the foot on the gas, because both of these pitching staffs are just such a toss-up right now as far as what you're going to get, that just the team that's going to be more relentless on offense, just taking advantage of each and every opportunity. I feel like that's probably going to be the team that comes out on top, unless one of the pitching staffs can, have a big impact. And then, of course, Zach, I feel like we should probably hit on the word on the street is Tanner Witt will probably be making his return on Sunday. He's probably going to start. He's not going to, it's not going to look like a typical start. It's going to be around 25, 30 pitches is what we think. So 1, maybe they send him back out there for the 2nd, depending on how the first goes. But the big thing with Tanner Witt right now is you hope he goes out there. He just, gets the experience of, he made it through all his rehab and he's earned it's never easy to come back from an injury like that. So he's earned, the right to go out there and, just have all the positive feelings associated with being back on the mound and getting over that hump. And that's going to be a really cool moment that you just hope sparks the rest of the team, specifically the pitching staff, that maybe will give them a jolt, just knowing they got their guy back out there, even in a limited capacity. And then we'll see what he actually looks like. We'll see, how his arm bounces back. But I tend to believe he's going to look pretty good just because he is Tanner Witt. So that's always going to be my default. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a really cool moment there. Anything you want to add on the Tanner Witt side of it all this weekend?
No, I think the inclusion of Tanner Witt, if he does in fact go on Sunday, which is what we've heard, that's what Pierce has said. That's every clue is that he's going to get the start and he will be on a pitch count of 25. I think the emotional boost for the team could be big, right? He's been known as a TCU killer of sorts, right, in his career against them. But it'll be interesting to see. It's interesting that it's going to be on Sunday. In some ways, you'd love to have that on Saturday, just because if everything goes well on Friday, you come out with that energy on Saturday. You see Tanner Witt on the mound, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But maybe they need it for Sunday, right? Just because they don't want to throw the rotation off too much of the rotation that there is, right? Yeah, it could really be huge dividends, but yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, outside of that, you mentioned the stolen bases. TCU's been running like crazy. That has been a problematic area for Texas so far this year. The pitchers haven't done the best job holding on runners. Diamet's been pretty good throwing out base runners. Galvan, not so much. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets another start on Saturday and if TCU tries to pick on him like some of the other teams have in the conference. TCU, they're going to hit. They've got plenty of guys hitting over 300. They've got plenty of power. It's going to be one of those weekends. You have anything else you want to hit on from a TCU perspective, or you want to give the people your prediction?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of hitters, look out for the shortstop, Anthony Silva. He's a true freshman. He pulled himself out of the MLB draft. He was going to be taken quite high, even probably higher than what Jalen Flores could have gone if he had been serious about going to MLB. And Silva's been the real deal, right? 359 on the year with a 1005 OPS, 5 home runs. He's legit. Like, he's a freshman phenom. You give him 3 years at TCU, and by the end of his time, he's going to be an absolute monster. The other top hitter for them is Carson Bowen, also another true freshman. And so they've got a lot of youth on their squad. And that's true of all the Big 12 teams, but more so TCU. They really rely on their freshmen. The other two names to know, of course, are Braden Taylor, who is the all everything for them. He hits for power, uber athletic third baseman. Just, he's a monster. And then, of course, familiar face is going to be Trey Richardson. He's the Baylor transfer. So it's a dangerous lineup from top to bottom. This is not a team that you should expect to have an off day throughout, right? They're going to have someone that stays hot. They're going to have someone that comes in and is able to, put a barrel on a ball. So, yeah, Texas pitching, if this was your time to figure it all out, this weekend would be the one time that you want to do that. But yeah, going into picks, it's tough because I think both teams have been up and down, but based on what I've seen from Texas pitching and the ability for TCU to run and the fact they're at home, I have TCU winning the series. So
yeah, I mean, it's tough because we can turn on the TV and watch the TCU pitchers walk it. We can look at the box scores and see that their rotation has been all jumbled and they've been struggling, but we have not, firsthand experienced the pain that the Texas pitching staff has inflicted on us recently. So that one just feels a little more real there, even if the numbers do indicate that Texas has been better up to this point on the mound. I think this series, man, I'm not going to be surprised with any of the 4 possible outcomes. Going into every 3-game series, you've got, one team could sweep, the other team could sweep, one team could win 2 out of 3, the other team can win 2 out of 3. Those are the 4 possible outcomes you have in a series. None of them would surprise me this weekend. I'm just going to say TCU takes 2 out of 3 because Texas is struggling so much right now. At least TCU had a pretty impressive win in the midweek game. But man, I don't know. This is just, we've got the Porter Brown revenge game. That'll be fun to track. I love a good revenge series. You got the Tanner Webb boost. You'd like to think that. I still feel good about Lucas Gordon. I'm going to feel good about the Friday game going forward. So it's really just Saturday and Sunday that I'm worried about. But yeah, we will see. We'll see how it goes. We both got Texas going 1-2 this weekend. Zach, we look at the Big 12 standings here. Texas is no longer at the top. They are tied for fourth with Texas Tech. Got West Virginia at the top now. I mean, I'll let you run through the updated, ever-changing conference standings in the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, talk about a jumble, right? 1 weekend makes all the difference. West Virginia is on a hot streak. They're 8-4. Oklahoma State sitting at 11-7. And then K-State sitting at 9-6. Texas is at 8-7. Texas Tech is at 8-7. Oklahoma's at 7-8. TCU's at 7-8. Kansas at 5-10 and 6 at Baylor 6-12. You know, if you look back at this past weekend, West Virginia did TCU dirty, but that actually helps Texas probably in the long run. You know, everyone should be thanking Baylor for stealing a game at Texas Tech so they didn't get swept, which would put Texas even further down the list. You know, Kansas State at 9-6, I don't think is an issue at all. If you look at their remaining schedule, they got Tech, Oklahoma State, and TCU. There's no joy in Manhattan the rest of the season, based on what I've seen. You know, you look at Texas Tech and they've got K-State, West Virginia, and KU. So, you know, realistically, you know, West Virginia's two big series are against Tech and Texas, but they also have a sneaky challenge against OU at home. So like I said, we talked about this last week. It very well could come down to the final week to see who's going to win the Big 12. I would say odds on favorite right now is probably Oklahoma State based on their remaining schedule, because they very well could go through and sweep K-State and OU, but I don't think they will. So yeah, it's going to be a beating until the very end to see who actually wants this thing.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it does not come down to the last weekend at this point. You mentioned that Oklahoma State kind of stood out to me too when I was looking at this. They've got 11 wins right now. So they've got 3 against Kansas State and 3 at OU. If they can get 5 wins there, that feels like that might be enough to take it this year. And 5 wins doesn't seem impossible against K-State and OU, but neither one of those teams are pushovers. So, I mean, it's probably more likely they go 4-2 or 3-3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got that series, you got the season finale lingering with West Virginia and Texas at the dish. You hope from a Texas standpoint that, you know, you've got something big to play for there, but it's weird, man. I mean, the conference is just so jumbled. Nobody looks good. We mentioned that the regional projections came out. K-State sitting there with hosting a regional, all of a sudden, you know, things can change pretty quickly. Texas Tech is now ranked number 14, just with a decent RPI there, even though they're still struggling on the road. You lose a home game to Baylor. That's embarrassing. It's not looking good overall for the conference this year. The Big 12 tournament there in Arlington. Who knows who's going to win that thing, man? That is, I mean, you feel decent about Oklahoma State with John Watts Brown, and then, you know, potentially getting Nolan McClain back here soon. So we'll see about that. But yeah, it is ever changing. You can't really feel confident week to week, but yeah, I mean, you know, the two things that stick out, you know, you got Oklahoma State sitting there with 11 wins, and you got West Virginia sitting there with only 4 losses. So a lot of baseball left to be played, and I'm sure things will change so dramatically, more than we can ever imagine by the time we're recording next week.
Yeah, if you look at the Big 12 series this weekend, it's Texas at TCU, Texas Tech at K-State, West Virginia at Baylor, Kansas at Oklahoma, and then Oklahoma State plays at Michigan, so it doesn't matter really. I mean, if you're looking at who to root for this weekend or games to watch, you really need K-State to at least take 1 game away from Texas Tech, maybe 2. You really need Baylor to take a game or 2 away from West Virginia. Baylor's been better at home. Maybe they get lucky and run into, but I can also see Weatherholt hitting 4 bombs into the Brazos River this weekend. So I don't know. And then Kansas at Oklahoma, you know, Kansas just isn't very good. So I don't think there's much of a chance there, but they're good enough to steal one from Oklahoma, as bad as Oklahoma has played. So yeah, you know, this weekend, I don't think shifts the standings amount too much, depending on what Texas and TCU does, depending on who comes out of that series. That's really going to kind of start to cement your top 3, your places in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see if we ever do get some separation in this conference, because that has just not been the case. up to this point, I like the call there with Kansas and Oklahoma. I feel like Oklahoma will probably play pretty well. I feel like they did look pretty good overall against Texas, even if it was just kind of drawing a bunch of walks. They played really well on defense, is something that we both hit on this weekend. So that was improved. Maybe they can carry that momentum a little bit. But yeah, you move to the rest of the country. Zach, we both sat here on this very Zoom call last week and praised the Vanderbilt Commodores for being the most complete team in the country. And they go out and they get swept by Tennessee, who had recently fallen out of the top 25. They are now back. They are now back in. You got Arkansas. They go out. They get swept by Georgia. It's just, I mean, how many good teams? I want to ask you, how many good teams are there from like a standard college baseball year where you're looking at the top 8 super regional hosts and you're like, man, this team has got some dudes on the mound and they can mash, and they've got these top picks. Just compared to a normal year, how many like good teams do you think we actually have this year? Because I think that list might be like 3 teams this year, man. I don't know.
It's slimming by the weekend. I mean, number 7 East Carolina got swept, Arkansas got swept, Vanderbilt got swept. It was just an ugly weekend. Virginia, I think, got swept. It was an ugly weekend overall. I don't know. It's crazy though. From the time that Texas played A&M's been on a tear, and Texas has fallen by the wayside. It's like those two just like swapped fortunes during that game. I don't understand it. But if you look at big series to watch this weekend, you got Miami versus Louisville. The ACC has been just a bloodbath over there. Everyone's sweeping or taking series when you shouldn't. A&M's playing Arkansas, which is a big weekend for A&M because they've been hot, and Arkansas just got swept. And so, they're vulnerable. If A&M were to come in and win that series, well, now you start looking at A&M as a top 25 team that potentially could put itself into a regional hosting projection. They're up in the RPI. So Coastal Carolina is up to 6. They're playing they're playing Louisiana. That's a huge series over in the Fun Belt. I really like Coastal Carolina. If you haven't seen them hit, you're never out of the game. Those guys get hit 9 home runs in a single inning, not blink an eye. Like they're a lot of fun to watch. You talk about Vanderbilt, they're number 5, but they're playing 15 Kentucky. Kentucky's kind of fighting for its regional hosting life at this point. Then you got Duke, who's been red hot. They smoked and swept Boston College. Now they go up against Virginia. And then out on the West Coast, the Cardiac Kids, Arizona State, they're facing off against Oregon, who's been, pretty solid all year. So there's really some really just top-notch baseball games across the weekend. But to your point, like I haven't seen a team yet, maybe outside of Wake Forest, maybe outside of a South Carolina, or if the pitching is right, LSU. But LSU lost to Nicholls State on Tuesday night. Okay, sure, why not? I just don't, there's not a Tennessee this year. There's not one that you're like, oh, damn, they're really, really good. LSU could be that, but they have such pitching questions that just outside of schemes, you don't know what you're going to get. So it's going to be a very, very helter-skelter postseason, in my opinion. I think we're going to have a lot of upsets this year.
Yeah, I mean, and that always makes it fun. I mean, you said, this is a good weekend. There's going to be a lot of good games on. I just think at this point, man, without very many great teams, any game you turn on, you don't know who's going to win, which always makes it exciting. It will probably make the tournament very chaotic this year, regardless of who's hosting and who's, a national seed. It'll be interesting to track down the stretch as we do kind of get into the bracketology, RPI heavy portion of the season and seeing who is able to come down and win these conferences. Zach, I think that is all we have for today. I would encourage everyone to subscribe to the Orange Bloods YouTube channel. Go ahead and like this video if you are watching here now. This is available in podcast format, so you can find this on Spotify. You can find this on Apple Podcasts. You just search Orange Bloods. It should take you to this podcast feed where you will find all the episodes of Around the Horn. You will also find all the great football shows that are going up weekly. Check out all of our coverage on orangebloods.com. Zach, do you have anything else that you want to shout out or talk about to the people? Do you have any insight on where Bijan Robinson is getting picked on Thursday? Any closing remarks here?
I'm predicting Bijan goes top 12. I know our running back is not a premium position at this point, but look, every single team's got this guy like 1A, 1B. And someone's going to sit there on draft day and go, I can't walk away from him, and they're going to take him early. I could be completely wrong. I don't follow the NFL at all, but that's my feeling.
Falcons at 8, starting to get some buzz. Of course, people are probably listening to this on like Friday, and it already happened. But yeah, Falcons are starting to get some buzz at 8. Arthur Smith, he loves a good running back, so I could see him taking the bait there with Bijan. But yeah, that'll be fun to watch on Thursday, along with some of the other Texas players, and then get the first round of the NFL draft Thursday night. Clear the way, clear the calendar for a little Texas TCU. Who can walk less batters? Always fun to watch. So yeah, with that, I think we will get out of here, and everyone enjoy some baseball this weekend.
Absolutely. Hook 'em.
Hook 'em.